So the consumers are demanding more and more. So the demand is increasing. And on the other hand, what will happen to the supply? So now the price is reducing. What will happen? So the suppliers that they do not deliver more and more. So they are reducing their, they deliver some, the supply might be reducing, right? So the, what will happen? So if you can see this point, you can see that the quantity of supply, so that is less than the quantity of demand, right? මෙතන ඔයාලට පේනවනේ මේ supply එක මෙතන තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මෙතන. මේ Q1 කියලා ගත්තොත් මේක Q2 කියලා ගත්තොත් Q1 එක හැමතිස්සෙම අඩුයි කියලා පේනවා Q2 එකට වඩා. හරිද? ඒ කියන්නේ අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම මොකද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ වෙලාවේදී demand එක quantity demand එක quantity supply එකට වඩා වැඩි. ඒ කියන්නේ මොකද්ද මෙතන වෙලා තියෙන්නේ? මෙතන තියෙන්නේ shortage එක, right? So there is a definitely shortage at the price ceiling point, right? So when there is a kind of, when you're imposing, when it comes to the government, when they are imposing price ceiling as a control mechanism, what will happen? So the quantity demand is less, quantity demand is higher than the quantity supply. So definitely there will be a shortage in the market, right? So once again, let's go to the definition, right? So if you just go to the definition of the go to the definition of the price ceiling. So it's a kind of a maximum price. So legally established maximum price. Who establish it? So that is the government. Government give the maximum price. So at which the good has to be sold. So normally when it comes to the maximum price, equilibrium price below the, above the daily. So it has to be below the equilibrium price, because now you know the community or the consumers that they are not in a position to pay this equilibrium price. So that's why you try to set the price somewhere below that, right? So it is definitely below the equilibrium price. So when it comes to the price ceiling, so please remember it's a maximum price. So it's a maximum price that gives by the government. And also when it comes to the price ceiling, it's always below the equilibrium price. So apart from that, you have to remember when there is a price ceiling, so there will be a shortage in the market because the quantity supply is less than the quantity demand, that the price ceiling point, right? Then we move to the price flow, right? So when it comes to the price flow, let's go to the graph first. When it comes to the price flow, so this is where you have the price flow. As I said you before, this is the supply curve and the demand curve. You have the equilibrium point where you have the equilibrium price, that is $3, right? So when it comes to the price flow, what will happen? So now the government feel, right, so in order to protect the suppliers, now at this point, by paying $3, that the suppliers might not be able to even cover their cost of production. So in order to protect the suppliers, sometimes you have to give them a kind of a more revenue. So in order to do that, what you have to do, that you might say, yes, this is the floor price, all right? So nobody can send below that price, right? So this is the floor price and nobody can send below that price. So the most best, I would say, perhaps the best known example for the price flow is the minimum wage, right? So the minimum wage means, so that is based on the view that someone working full time should be able to afford the basic standard of living. හරිද? අපි minimum wage එකක් හදන්නේ කොහොමද? ඒ කියන්නේ අපි minimum wage එකක් හැමතිස්සෙම හදන්නේ අපි හිතනවා හරි සාමාන්‍ය දවසක වැඩ කරන මිනිස්සෙක්ට කොච්චර ගෙවන්න ඕනේද සාමාන්‍ය standard of living වලට ජීවත් වෙන්න. So that has to be there. So that is how we measure the minimum wage. So when it comes to the minimum wage, we say to the market, right, so you have to at least pay this amount, right? So that is there. So the price flow, in a sense, that you cannot at least has to be there. So all but you cannot go below that, right? So that is there. So the price flows, sometimes that we call for the price, sometimes we call them as the price supports, because they support the price by preventing it from falling below a certain level, right? So when it comes to the, if you just think about the world scenario around the world, many countries have passed laws to create agricultural price supports, right? So when it comes to the farm prices and the farm income fluctuations, there are many ways, right? So when we come to the price flows, that is always set above the market equilibrium price, as you can see. So if you just think about the market equilibrium price, it is somewhere here. So we always go above the market equilibrium price. So the price flows always set above the market equilibrium price. And when it comes to these price flows and the price ceiling, so that they have definitely a certain impact towards the market. So we'll talk about those stuff a little later. So this is the picture of the price flow. And also when it comes to the price flows, Lama, so when we're talking about the price ceiling, I said you that there is a shortage. But when it comes to the price flows, what happens to the quantity supply and the quantity demand? So if you can think about this quantity, one second. So when it comes to the quantity demand and the quantity supply, so here you have the okay, what's happening? So if you just think about this supply curve, right? So if you just think about the quantity supply, it's somewhere here, and the quantity demand is somewhere here. So how you can see now the quantity supply is higher than the quantity demand, right? Now the quantity supply is higher than the quantity demand. So here you can see it's 120 the quantity supply, and the quantity demanded is 80. So it's always the quantity supply is higher than the quantity demand. So what will happen? So when the quantity supply is higher than the quantity demand, so there will be definitely excess in the market, right? So surplus is there, right? So that's why I said this is the scenario of the price flow. If you just go back to the definition of the price flow, right? So if you just go back to the definition of the price flow, you can see that the price flow is also a kind of minimum price that is established by the government, right? So if you can see, this is the minimum price that is established by the government, and it's also above the equilibrium, always above the equilibrium, right? So it's always above the equilibrium price. So if you just think about the price ceiling, it is below the equilibrium price. So when it comes to the price flows, it is always set above the equilibrium price, because when it comes to the equilibrium price, you feel like that the supply cannot survive with the equilibrium price, so you have to set it more beyond that. So you have to set it above. So you say that you cannot go below the price flows because you have to go beyond it, right? So when it comes to the price flows, Nama, so that there will be definitely a excess, right? So this is the definition of the price ceiling and the price flows, and we have talked about the graphical scenario of the price ceiling and the price flows, right? If we go to the next thing. So if you just think about the key points when it comes to the price ceiling and the price flows, so the price ceiling, so it's prevent the prices from rising above a certain level. So when it's going up, when it's moving too high, now you have to protect your consumers. So you prevent price from rising above certain levels. So when the price ceiling is, so what you have to do when you're setting the price ceiling, you set it always below the equilibrium price, because the equilibrium price, now the customers or the consumers are not in a position to pay the equilibrium price. So in order to give a support for the consumers, that you have to set your price below the equilibrium. So at that point, what will happen? So the excess quantities that there might be definitely, I mean, when it comes to the quantity demand, so that it definitely will exceed the quantity supply, and that gives you a shortage, right? And when it comes to the price flows, so that's prevent the price from falling below a certain levels, because you feel like that when the price is falling below, what will happen, that the suppliers might not be able to survive in the market, that they cannot have a sustainable business. So in order to do that, what you have to do, that you have to protect your suppliers. So that in that case, you set the price flows. So how you have to do it? So you set the price flows that is always above the equilibrium, right? So when the price flows is set, it's always above the equilibrium price. So what will happen? So the quantity supply will exceed the quantity demanded, and there will be definitely excess or the surplus in the supply, right? So the key points are when the government laws regulate the prices, right? So instead of letting the market forces to determine the prices, so as I said you before that earlier, what we have done, that we let the supply and the demand curve to decide whatever the price and the quantity that they have to settle down. So we said that is not, we call that point as the equilibrium price. But when it comes to the government laws, right, sometimes the government might interfere through the laws and the regulations, that they might interfere through the price mechanism, through the price control, instead of letting the market forces to determine their prices, that they might interfere or they might control the prices, and we call it as price controls. When it comes to the price control, that there are two ways that they used to do that, that is the price ceiling and the price floors. So the price floors and the price ceiling, that might gives you a kind of a different choices of the quantity demand and the quantity supplies, but they do not shift the demand or supply curve. So if you can remember, supply curve demand curve demand curve shift supply curve shift right. So that is the most important thing. Right. So when we're talking about this particular lesson, so please remember, so here we have talked about how the government interfere through the price control mechanisms, right? So when it comes to the government, rather than letting the market forces to determine the prices by itself, sometimes the government might interfere due to the public pressure or the suppliers' pressure in order to reduce or increase some of the prices, in order to protect the consumers as well as in order to protect the suppliers. So in that case, they might use some of the price ceilings as well as some of the price floors. So when it comes to the price ceiling, as I said you before, so you have to set it always below the equilibrium price. Price ceiling is always below the equilibrium price, because at that point the consumers cannot survive with the equilibrium price. So that is why you have to set it below the equilibrium price, right? So these are the points. So when it comes to the price floors, as I said you before, you have to set it always above the equilibrium price. So when it comes to the price ceiling, so there might be definitely shortage in the market. When it comes to the price floors, there might be a surplus in the market, right? So that is with regarding to the price ceilings and price controls.